What is going on, everybody? So today we're going to be doing a topic video, and today we're going to get a little spicy for you all out there. And I think that it's good to sometimes have uncomfortable conversations. It shouldn't be uncomfortable, but for some reason in our society, we've deemed things that are part of normal life to be really uncomfortable and uneasy for some people. And today we're going to talk about sex. I know you didn't think that you were ever going to get a sex lecture from me, the movie critic online. But what I've noticed on Twitter lately and on TikTok and all different kinds of places is that there's been this enormous debate for a while about sex in cinema, and should sex scenes exist in cinema, and should we convey that part of human existence. And I've seen people as far as like Quentin Tarantino recently releasing a statement about how he doesn't put sex scenes in his movies. I mean, but some of the stuff that the guy puts in his movies, he's got his own thing, and you know that that's pretty much worse than a lot of the sex scenes that you see in films. But regardless of all that, there's this huge topic going around about whether or not sex scenes should be in film, and I think it opens up an even larger conversation about our society as a whole. My friend Ray and I have the podcast, the Film Monsters podcast, which if you aren't subscribed to and you don't listen to, you should be ashamed of yourself. But aside from that, we interviewed director Mercedes Bryce Morgan recently for her film Spoonful of Sugar, and when we talked with her, we got into a larger discussion about sex in film and how, you know, sex is a part of life. It's a part of day-to-day existence for most people that are adults out there. And because of that, it's really strange to her and to us that people are so uncomfortable with something that is such a day-to-day part of life and a day-to-day part of existence. And why are people so scared and uncomfortable by something that happens in everyday life? So if you can't get the gist of what I'm going to be saying today, it is that I think that sex scenes do belong in movies because it is a part of life, and sex is obviously, especially in relationships, and not even in relationships necessarily, but it's one of the most intimate forms of affection you can show someone, or it can just be you going and having a good time. It doesn't really matter, but there is a lot of different things that you can convey about a person's personality through sex in a film, and I think that that's something really important. I think about something like, for instance, look at a film like If Beale Street Could Talk. If Beale Street Could Talk is one of the most beautiful love stories that I've ever seen in my life. Absolutely incredible. Takes place during the civil rights movement. It is a really just like empowering, gorgeous story of love and how a million different things can get in the way for two people who deserve to be together, not to be able to be together without having to fight through something extremely horrible, and especially like racism and dealing with racism, having to overcome hate because of racism. And one of the things about this movie is it truly has one of the most beautiful sex scenes I've ever seen in a film. The passion conveyed between the two characters feels like something so realistic, so lived in, and so just palpable that, like, you, how can you not watch that and feel moved? I really truly believe that, you know, sex and film can be portrayed in a way that really kind of builds your connection with those characters because you are seeing them at their most intimate. You are seeing them at their most vulnerable, and them literally showing their most ultimate form of affection towards the person that they love the most. And, you know, it's really interesting to me that, like, you can have a scene like that in a movie and that people can still try to argue that it shouldn't be in film, and it's such a silly thing. And I can go through example after example. You know, another great look at that would be the film Don't Look Now from the 1970s, which is a film about a husband and wife couple who lose their daughter in a really traumatic way. And there's a sex scene really early on in the film, and it's considered one of the most realistic sex scenes in a movie because of the interactions between the characters, and they're like laughing in between, and it feels really natural. It feels like real life. And these are people who are trying to overcome a horrible tragedy in their lives and get their lives back on track. And showing something as intimate as a sex scene at this period in their lives shows kind of where they're at mentally and how they're trying to progress and move forward. And, you know, there's so many instances that those can be used in a way that works really well. And I'm not even saying that that necessarily has to be what it is, because there's sex scenes in movies that are absolutely hilarious that are meant for comedic effect. There are sex scenes in movies just to have sex scenes in movies. I mean, think of the glut of slasher films in the 1980s, but you can even look at that as like a cautionary tale to kids to not have sex, which is a conversation for an entirely other day. But I think that it's really interesting that something that should be relatively normalized in our culture is so taboo, and like people think that there's no validity as to why it should exist, and people saying, oh, it's just porn and blah blah blah, and there's a lot of idiocy behind it. And I think that in my own personal belief, I think it's because being a United States citizen and living in a country that feels so embedded in conservative Christian ideologies that that's really the whole reason there's any sort of stigma and taboo behind it, is because it's been treated as so taboo for so long. But also, as someone who was in the Christian church for a long time, because I was a minister's son, and I watched a lot of different high profile members of churches and ministers lose their jobs for having affairs on their wives and their husbands, and all this crazy stuff that they preach that you shouldn't do, that they absolutely did do. It's funny to think about that level of hypocrisy, and how, like, if people were just more open and willing to have a conversation, and if we were able to educate, young people on like sex and the importance of safe sex, and just all of the things that we could do to progress and move the country forward, so people could be more open-minded and caring and loving towards each other, then this whole conversation wouldn't even be in existence. And I think that a lot of it is just due to the fact that people are really uncomfortable and don't like to talk about things that are taboo. And I think that this is a really good conversation to have, and I'd love to hear in the comments what your opinions are on this. But I personally believe that there is 100% validity to having sex scenes in films, because I feel like that it can really show where people are at in their relationships, just through not only the act of sex, but like facial expressions, and just everything that you can kind of embody about those characters in that moment can show where they're at in their own lives. And I think it's been utilized so perfectly. Another example I think of is a film like The Piano Teacher from Michael Haneke, that shows kind of the other side of sex, where it's like sex is a very traumatizing thing for our lead character, and she's almost using sex as like a way to overcome a lot of her trauma that she's experienced, and to a point where it gets violent. And I think that whole psychosexual subgenre film is also really fascinating to me, and it really kind of looks at human beings through all different kinds of lenses. But I could trail on about that for an eternity, but I would love to hear what your opinion is in the comments, and do you agree or disagree with me? And if you do disagree, why? I'd love to hear why you think that there shouldn't be sex scenes in movies, and I can just tell you that you're wrong. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material, and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.